Top 10 non-conference games in 2024 right here at the Voice of College Football. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's get right to it. And appropriately enough, we've got a tie for number 10, but this one makes sense. This is not a cop-out. Apple Cup and the Civil War both preserved despite all the realignment across college football. I am so glad to see that Washington State and Oregon State will be on the same field against each other, retaining their rivalries. Unlike Bedlam, unlike Texas A&M, unlike Nebraska and Oklahoma from years gone by, these rivalries preserved at least in the near future. Of course, Washington has dominated the series against Wazoo, 76-33, and the Ducks with a healthy lead against the Beavers, and Oregon gunning for a Big Ten championship, gunning for a national championship with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback coming in from OU, taking on a heavy underdog, you would think at this point in the season, from Corvallis. Of course, Jonathan Smith has made his way to Michigan State. Washington is one of the most unique situations in the history of college football. Why, Mark? Well, new coach. Okay, that happens all the time. New coaching staff, of course, goes along with the first point. New quarterback. 2 starters coming back. And a new conference. That's unprecedented. Washington, the Huskies, we won't recognize them, but we've certainly seen Will Rogers throw the ball as much as anybody in college football history, which that's actually a fact. Will Rogers and Washington taking on Wazoo, and their new quarterback, John Mateer, taking over for Cam Ward. It could be a rough season with Washington State, although they've got that light Mountain West heavy schedule. All right. Non-conference game number 10 is a tie. Apple Cup, Civil War. The ACC and the SEC clash in Raleigh on September 7th as the Vols come to town. Nico Iamaleavea, we saw what he could do in the bowl trouncing of Iowa, 35-0. He's got a fleet set of wide receivers, including Brew McCoy. Tennessee had a top 25 defense, but they are missing edge rusher Tyler Barron, who transferred to Louisville, but is still looking for a home as he is transferring again. Back to this one. The Wolfpack, of course, led now by Grayson McCall after 5 years at Coastal Carolina, accounting for over 11,000 yards total offense and 106 touchdowns. He's got a new uniform, new teammates, a new coach, and Dave Dorn, who has, of course, done a really good job at NC State in recent years, 9-4 finish in 2023. Kevin Concepcion will be Grayson McCall's favorite target, 71 catches, 10 touchdowns, and he hurts defenses on the power sweep as well with over 300 yards rushing out of that wide receiver spot. Interesting matchup between the ACC and the SEC. Vols and Wolfpack, week 2. Notre Dame smacked around Texas A&M in back-to-back Cotton Bowls in 1993 and 94. And now some 30 years later, they're back in Texas to take another swing at the Aggies and new head coach Mike Elko. On the Notre Dame side, it's Marcus Freeman, of course, in year number 3 after winning 19 and losing 7 the first 2 years. Is this the year for the Irish to break into the elite of college football? They've got a 12-team college football playoff to make, of course. You got to consider Texas A&M a dark horse possible selection. Of course, Notre Dame had a great defense last year. They lose a lot of pieces off that defense, but Benjamin Morris back at cornerback, and of course, we've got Xavier Watts, arguably the best defensive player in college football, back for the Irish. On offense, it's Riley Leonard at the controls, taking over for Sam Hartman as the Irish go back to the ACC for another transfer quarterback. But who will be the game changer? It was not Tobias Merriweather. It was not Chris Tyree. Will it be Jaden Greathouse? On the Texas A&M side, Connor Wigman at quarterback needs to stay healthy. 8 touchdowns, 2 picks in his starting debut last season. Of course, Elko did wonders at Duke, and of course, he had a hand in recruiting and signing some of these players at Texas A&M back when he was defensive coordinator. Texas A&M will run the football, but can they run it against the Irish? And they're going to give it a shot with Amari Daniels, Reuben Owens, and Le'Veon Moss, a triple head monster out of that Aggies backfield. Kyle Field is the site for game number 8, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Let's rustle up the old Big 8 days of yore when Colorado visits Nebraska in week 2. Of course, the two teams got together last year as Colorado put it on the Huskers 36-14. Shedeur Sanders ripping up that Huskers defense 31-42 for 393 and 2 touchdowns. But Nebraska will not have Jeff Sims to give away the ball game in the first half. This is, of course, the dawning of the Dylan Raiola era at Nebraska, and he's got a couple of capable receivers to help him out through the transfer portal in Jamal Banks from Wake Forest and Isaiah Nair, who basically comes in from Wyoming with a pit stop last year at Texas. It's Colorado with Dallin Hayden at running back in from Ohio State, and a revamped roster, of course, with Deion Sanders at the helm. And we've got two contrasting styles, not necessarily just on the field, as Nebraska will try to ram it down the throats of the Buffs, and the Buffs will sling it all over the field with Shedeur Sanders and company. And, of course, Travis Hunter, arguably the best athlete in college football. This is more about the coaching styles off the field and building programs. Matt Rule does it the old-fashioned way. He's a grinder. We presented the stats a few weeks ago of over 400 in-home visits, visiting over 100 high schools since joining the Nebraska staff and being named the head coach the same month as Deion Sanders, who has made how many recruiting stops? Visited how many players in-home? 0 on both accounts. But can Deion get it done his way? It's Nebraska, it's Colorado. I, for one, enjoy the SEC-ACC matchups on Thanksgiving weekend as we can get some semblance of feel for the balance between the two conferences. And one of the main matchups down through the years, of course, has been two of the great programs in both conferences, Florida and Florida State. Billy Napier having a rough ride at Florida, of course, 6-7, then 5-7. And with that brutal schedule, will he even make it to November 29th in the final weekend of the season? Florida leads this series all time 37-29. And again, the Gators face a brutal schedule. Their final 5, really their final 7. This is arguably the toughest schedule we've seen in college football in years. Graham Mertz did contribute a fine season in his first year at Florida, coming in from Wisconsin. Almost set an SEC completion percentage record, only threw 3 interceptions. They want him to take more chances downfield, though, as he's more comfortable with the offense. Florida State lost, outside of Ann Arbor, more talent to the NFL draft than anyone that was crucial. They didn't have the most players drafted, but that was crucial to their 13-1 run. Jordan Travis, the most important loss, of course, moving out of the NFL, replaced by DJ Uiagalelei. Is there going to be that much of a drop-off at quarterback for Florida State? Can they repeat in the ACC? Well, this game doesn't affect that, but it could affect a college football playoff appearance by Mike Norvell's team that eluded them in a 4-team field in 2023. It's the final day of the regular season. It's Florida State at number 5 on our top 10 list of biggest non-conference matchups for 2024. It's always interesting when the Big Ten and the SEC get together. It's Bama, Wisconsin, as the Tide travels north of the Mason-Dixon line for the first time since going to Happy Valley in 2010 as they visit Wisconsin. These two teams got together in 2015 as Derrick Henry ran it down the Badgers' throats in a 35-17 win for the Tide as they marched on to the national championship this season. On the Alabama side, of course, Jalen Milroe worked his issues out early last season, turned out to be a capable, more than capable quarterback, a great deep ball thrower, and of course, a threat on the ground. And then other than that, on both sides of the ball for Alabama, it's generally a pretty nondescript team of just 4 and 5 stars all over the place, tripping over themselves. Kalen DeBoer is going to have to rein in the talent, figure things out, and make Bama a contender again. And, of course, for Wisconsin, it's Luke Fickell. Year 2, you would have to consider year 1 to be a slight disappointment at 7-6. New quarterback Tyler Van Dyke tries to get his career back on track after an outstanding 2021, but faltering the past 2 seasons due to lack of offensive line play 2 years ago, lack of receiver play last year, and, of course, his own deficiencies and throwing the ball away to the opposite jersey way too much. He's got Will Pauling with 74 catches for Wisconsin to help him out. But what's going to help out TVD more than anything? With Braylon Allen moving on to the NFL, Ches Malusi has to stay healthy. The former Clemson back has been strong for the Badgers when he's on the field. September 14th, it's Bama, Wisconsin. For the loser of game number 4 in our top 10 non-conference matchups for 2024 right here at the Voice of College Football, it could be a rough season, especially if that team is the Florida Gators. Because we talked about their schedule before. It is brutal. And they've got a difficult non-conference schedule, which includes UCF, Florida State, and this game against Miami. So Florida does play the Florida State Championship and playing all the major teams, and it starts with the Canes in the swamp. Graham Mertz coming off a fine season, as we noted. And that Florida defense, though, has not been up to standard for quite some time, actually since the days of Muschamp and then McElwain. The Billy Napier Florida defense has been pretty awful. They will have to deal with Cam Ward throwing to Xavier Restrepo and also Jacoby George, two of the best wide receivers in the ACC. On opening night, it's Florida in the swamp trying to get off to a good start because there are rough affairs to deal with later, taking on the Canes. It might be 21 years too late, but it's going to be a heck of a time watching USC and LSU get together on the opening weekend Sunday night game in Vegas. I'm alluding to, of course, what should have been the 2003 BCS championship game as LSU won in New Orleans against Oklahoma and USC won the Rose Bowl against Michigan, and they split a national championship. But here we are to open the season. Question marks abound all over the place for both teams. Garrett Nussmeier is no Jaden Daniels. However, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. He's off to the NFL as the number 2 pick in the draft. Garrett Nussmeier did show us good signs, though, especially in that bowl win against Wisconsin when he ripped up the Badgers through the air for 35 points. He's got a host of new receivers. Doesn't have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. Fill in these names: Kyron Lacey, Aaron Anderson, also Chris Hilton. They are speedsters. They can burn. We're talking like 22, 23 miles per hour clocked during spring practice. On the USC side, of course, Miller Moss taking over for the number 1 pick in the draft, Caleb Williams. We should have seen these two teams play last year. How about that? Forget 21 years ago, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, but it's Miller Moss trying to prove that his bowl performance against Louisville, 6 touchdowns in the Holiday, is no fluke, and that former UCLA defensive coordinator now taking over the USC defense, D'Anton Lynn, has righted the ship on that side of the ball for Lincoln Riley. This is one of the great games and matchups and blue blood matchups in college football for 2024. It's USC LSU in Vegas. Down to the final 2 in our list of the top 10 non-conference matchups for 2024 right here at the Voice of College Football. And we go to Georgia Clemson. Some people believe that these two programs should be playing every year. And when they get together, it's typically entertaining. They did about 10 years ago and split 2 matchups when it was Dabo on one sideline against Mark Richt. 2 extremely talented football teams at that time. Not too bad the affair 3 years ago if you love defense. That was JT Daniels 3 teams ago against DJ Uiagalelei 3 teams ago. And, of course, Georgia won the game on a pick 6, 10-3 in Charlotte. Clemson's going to need Cade Klubnik to become the quarterback we've expected him to be as a former 5-star. He's been decent, but not championship-level play. And against this Georgia defense, of course, he is going to have to be all of that. Clemson would have to be a decided underdog in this game. Carson Beck, of course, showed that he could take over for Stetson Bennett and be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And he's not going to have some of his best receivers and maybe the best player in college football, Brock Bowers, this year. But he does have a slew of excellent wide receivers to throw to, led by Dominic Leggett and Ra Thomas. And it's Clemson, it's Georgia. This one should be extremely meaningful on opening weekend. We're down to game number 1 in our top 10 non-conference matchups here at the Voice of College Football, and you've got one guess. I think you can nail it at this point. They almost played for the 2023 national championship. And Texas almost pulled off a win against Washington. Quinn Ewers had 4 shots from the 12-yard line, and they almost pulled off a game in which they got outplayed, but it didn't happen. And Michigan, of course, took down Alabama and Washington for the national championship. Now, these are the 2 teams that lost the most players in the NFL draft. Texas 11, Michigan 13. But they still have 2 excellent football teams. Of course, Michigan's searching for a quarterback. Will it be Alex Orji, Davis Warren? Those would be the 2 candidates most likely to be suiting up and starting, taking that first snap of the season, and then in week 2 against Texas with Quinn Ewers coming to town. Texas, Michigan at the Big House. It should be something else. Our number 1 game in college football non-conference in 2024. Leave your comments down below. We always love to hear from you. Get your suggestions, maybe some other games. We threw out about 25, 30 games that were originally on the list to get down to 10. Next up is going to be our under the radar non-conference matchups for 2024. Lock it in with a like, and please subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football.